What if I told you that in just 7 days you could completely change the emotional trajectory of your relationship with an avoidant, not by begging, not by chasing, but by mastering 7 specific words, 7 bold moves, and showing up with unshakable energy? This isn't manipulation, it's transformation. And once you understand this formula, you'll never look at love the same way again. Avoidants aren't heartless, they're scared. They don't push you away because you're not enough. They push you away because deep down, they fear losing control. But here's the truth, you can flip the script. You don't need to become someone else. You need to activate a different part of you. The part that speaks directly to their subconscious, through your words, your presence, and your energy. The moment you say the words "I understand" to an avoidant, everything changes, not because the words themselves are magical, but because of the energy they carry. You see, most avoidant individuals grew up in environments where their emotions were either ignored, judged, or overwhelmed by others. Somewhere along the way, they learned this painful lesson: closeness isn't safe, vulnerability gets punished. So when you come at them with pressure, questions, or the demand to open up, it triggers their internal alarm system. Their walls go up. Their instincts tell them to pull away to protect themselves. And every time you try harder, they retreat deeper. But when you lean back and simply say, "I understand your need for space," you disrupt their usual pattern. You send a message that their instinct to self-protect is not being threatened. You're no longer the person trying to force closeness. You've become the one who sees them clearly and respects them deeply. That, to an avoidant, is rare. It's disarming. It speaks directly to their nervous system. The power of these words doesn't come from manipulation. It comes from empathy fused with strength. When you say, "I understand," you're not giving up on the relationship. You're taking your hands off the steering wheel. You're creating a space where their defenses aren't needed, and in that space, something incredible starts to happen. They begin to feel safe, not because you chased them, not because you fixed them, but because, for the first time, they're being seen without judgment. There's a difference between understanding someone and tolerating their behavior. Tolerance is passive. Understanding is active. It's an emotional decision to stay centered while someone else struggles to be close. And when an avoidant feels understood, truly understood, their fear softens, their walls loosen. The battle in their mind, between wanting connection and fearing it, starts to quiet down. Now here's the key. When you say "I understand," don't just say it with your mouth. Say it with your tone, your body language, your absence of urgency. Let it radiate calm certainty. Let your energy say, "You don't have to run, I'm not chasing." That's where the shift begins, not just in them, but in you. Because emotional mastery isn't about getting a response. It's about owning your presence no matter what response you get. This is the first spark that flips the switch, and the foundation for the rest of the 7-day transformation. Pulling back isn't giving up. It's giving space, for power, for energy, for attraction to rebuild. Most people think love is about doing more, saying more, showing more. But when it comes to someone with avoidant tendencies, the more you do, the less they feel. Why? Because they aren't calibrated to absorb closeness the way you are. For them, emotional pressure feels like suffocation, even if your intentions are pure. That's why your pull back isn't a punishment, it's a pivot. A powerful move in emotional leadership, when you intentionally step back, not in bitterness, not in silence that screams pain, but with calm, grounded energy, you signal something incredibly rare. You are not emotionally dependent on them to regulate your own peace. That's a game changer. That's when they start noticing you again, not as someone who's constantly orbiting their world, but as someone who has a powerful orbit of their own. And this move, when done correctly, creates magnetic tension. Not drama, not chaos, tension, the kind of tension that activates curiosity. Avoidants are deeply sensitive beneath their detachment, and when the person they're used to hearing from suddenly goes quiet, not cold, not reactive, just still, it sends a ripple through their internal world. Suddenly they feel something missing, your energy, your attention, your consistency, and that absence speaks louder than any text or call ever could. This is not about playing hard to get. That's surface level. This is about becoming hard to forget, and the way you do that is by shifting your energy inward. Instead of directing it all toward them, toward fixing, helping, chasing, you reclaim it. You invest it in yourself, your growth, your passions, your peace. You show, through your silence, that your world doesn't collapse without their presence. That's not indifference. It's self-respect. When you step back, the message you're sending isn't "I'm done with you." It's "I trust that what's meant for me won't need to be forced." That level of certainty is rare, it's electric, and the avoidant, even if they can't express it, feels it. It pierces their emotional armor. It interrupts their avoidance pattern. It starts flipping their switch, not because you begged, but because you backed off with purpose. Remember, the ones who chase are rarely seen, but the ones who stand still in strength, they are impossible to ignore. There comes a moment in every connection, especially with someone avoidant, where you hit an invisible wall. You've tried understanding, you've tried patience, you've tried love in all the ways you were taught to give it, and still, you're met with distance, silence, emotional coldness. That's the moment when most people either break down or burn out. But there's another path, a more powerful one, and it begins with 3 life-changing words: "I choose me." Now, at first, those words might sound selfish, especially if you're someone who's always been the giver, the peacemaker, the one who waits. But the truth is, choosing yourself is the most loving thing you can do, for you and for them. Because the minute you choose you, something shifts in your energy. You stop showing up from a place of lack and start radiating from a place of self-worth. That shift is magnetic, and it's exactly what flips an avoidance emotional radar. Avoidants aren't drawn to people who sacrifice themselves to be close. That might sound harsh, but it's the truth. When you abandon yourself to win their love, you actually confirm their deepest fear. That love equals pressure. That closeness means losing freedom. But when you say, "I'm choosing myself right now, not to punish you but to protect me," you rewrite that script completely. You become someone they can feel safe around because you're not trying to extract emotional oxygen from them. You're already breathing on your own, and here's the twist. When you truly choose yourself, it's not about slamming doors or cutting people off. It's about shifting your focus back inward. It's about asking yourself, what do I need right now? What lights me up? What am I tolerating that's quietly killing my spirit? And when you start answering those questions with action, you become different. Your energy becomes grounded, calm, and untouchable. Avoidants feel that, even from miles away. Suddenly, the person who used to orbit them is now orbiting their own purpose. The person who used to chase is now centered. And that is when the avoidant starts questioning everything. Wait, did I lose them? Were they always this strong? Why do I feel the need to reach out now? You didn't say anything. You didn't send a dramatic text. You just chose you, fully, unapologetically, and with deep inner conviction. And when you do that, you no longer need to flip their switch, because your light is already on. Human beings are wired to notice patterns. We grow familiar with what's predictable, what feels safe even if it's painful, and avoidants, they're masters at spotting emotional patterns. They know when you'll call, they know you'll text, they expect you to ask what's wrong, to try to fix the silence, and because they expect it, they stop valuing it. It blends into background noise. The more consistent your chase, the more invisible you become to their emotional radar. So if you want to break that pattern, you have to become the one thing their nervous system doesn't expect: unpredictable. The power in being unexpected isn't about playing games. It's about breaking the emotional autopilot. When someone is used to you reacting a certain way, your behavior becomes part of the environment. And let's be honest, if you're always the one who reaches out, checks in, apologizes first, or asks for clarity, you've become predictable. Not weak, not wrong, just expected, and what's expected becomes easy to take for granted. Now imagine this: you don't text back right away, not with spite but with peace. You don't initiate the check-in. You don't ask where things are going. You don't do what you always do. That shift, subtle but powerful, forces the avoidant to confront something unfamiliar, uncertainty. For the first time, they're not in full control of the dynamic. They're not sure where you emotionally stand, and that makes them pay attention, not out of panic but curiosity. This is where the magic begins. When you change your pattern, their brain starts scanning for answers. Why aren't they doing what they always do? Are they pulling away? Have they moved on? Do they feel different? These questions create internal disruption, healthy disruption. It interrupts their cycle of distancing. It flips their emotional script. But here's the most important part. This only works when your unpredictability is authentic, not forced, not a tactic, real change, real detachment, real redirection of your focus. When you're truly pouring into your own life, you naturally become less available, not to provoke them, but because you're actually busy living. That energy doesn't just look different, it feels different. And avoidants feel energy more than words. They may not say it, but they notice. They sense the shift, and often that's the exact moment they start moving toward you, not because you chased, but because you changed. You became the question they don't know how to answer. And that's irresistible. Pressure is the quickest way to shut down an avoidant, not because they don't care, not because they're cold, but because pressure awakens something old inside them, something deeply wired. It reminds them of moments in childhood or early relationships when love felt heavy, conditional, or overwhelming. So when they feel you needing a certain outcome, pushing for clarity, or asking them to just talk about it, their nervous system tightens. Their instinct retreat, not because you're wrong, but because pressure feels like danger. That's why saying there's no pressure becomes one of the most powerful tools you can use in this dynamic. When said from a genuine place, not as reverse psychology, not as bait, but from true inner calm, it tells the avoidant, you're free, you don't owe me anything, I'm not here to trap you emotionally, I'm here to be present, not to perform or persuade. That message speaks straight to the fear hiding beneath their distance. Avoidants don't fall in love when they're pushed. They soften when they feel safe. And safety doesn't come from begging for connection. It comes from presence without pressure. It comes from giving space without punishment. When you say no pressure, what you're really saying is, I am whole with or without this moment. I'm enjoying you, but I'm not trying to own you. I welcome your presence, but I'm not addicted to it. That energy is rare. That energy flips the dynamic. Here's what happens when you truly let go of pressure. The emotional air between you clears. Suddenly, the avoidant isn't navigating your expectations. They're simply experiencing your energy. And when that energy feels light, grounded, and unattached, it becomes safe to step closer. The space becomes warm, not suffocating, and the ironic truth is, the less you push, the more they lean in. Saying no pressure isn't a weakness, it's power. It means you trust the bond enough to not control it. It means you trust yourself enough to walk away if you're not being valued. And from that space, real connection can grow, not one based on fear or urgency, but on mutual desire. You're not lowering your standards, you're raising the frequency of the entire relationship. And whether they meet you there or not, you've already won. Because you've mastered the ability to love with openness without losing yourself in the process. And that is the pressure-free power that transforms everything. One of the most misunderstood truths in relationships, especially with avoidant individuals, is that your greatest influence is not what you say. It's how you live. Words can be ignored. Promises can be forgotten. Even presence can be taken for granted. But the way you move through life, the energy you carry, the way you fill your days with purpose, passion, and power, that speaks directly to the part of them that can't be shut off. Avoidants don't respond to emotional pressure, they respond to emotional gravity, and the most magnetic people aren't the ones constantly asking to be loved. They're the ones too focused on becoming love, living in alignment, pursuing their calling. That energy, it's contagious, it's rare. It pierces through fear and avoidance without ever needing to say a word. So if you really want to shift the dynamic with an avoidant, stop watching your phone. Stop analyzing their every word. Stop trying to decode silence. Instead, shift the spotlight. Turn it inward. Ask yourself, am I showing up in my life the way I deserve? Am I living like someone I would chase? Am I being the kind of person I want to attract? Because when your life starts moving in powerful, fulfilling directions, without them at the center, they feel it deeply. This isn't about pretending you don't care. This is about knowing that you matter more than the story you've been chasing. When your days are full of momentum, when you're reading, growing, laughing, connecting, creating, you become a source of energy, not a seeker of it. And avoidants feel that shift. They may not have the words for it, but something changes in their perception of you. They're not waiting for me anymore. They're not circling. They're expanding. That expansion creates space. Space for the avoidant to approach without fear. Space for new conversations to emerge. Space for you to realize whether or not they even deserve access to your new level of growth. Because leading with your life is the most grounded form of detachment. It means you're no longer trying to be chosen. You're choosing yourself daily through action, not just affirmation. And ironically, that's when the avoidant starts to notice. Not just because you've changed, but because you've become something they weren't prepared for. A person who doesn't orbit their silence but shines so brightly that silence is no longer the center of gravity. That's when attraction is reborn, not out of need but out of undeniable energy. There's something profoundly powerful about being able to say, "I'm good," and mean it with your entire being, not out of denial, not out of pride, but from a place of genuine emotional strength. It's the kind of statement that doesn't shout, but echoes. It signals that you've reached a point where your peace is no longer dependent on someone else's presence, clarity, or affection. And when you're dealing with an avoidant, those two words, "I'm good," carry a frequency that they can't ignore. You see, avoidants are used to being emotionally chased. They're familiar with people trying to fix them, figure them out, or pull them closer. And when they sense that emotional dependence, even if it's subtle, their reflex is to run. Not because they don't care, but because closeness feels like a trap. They brace for the expectation, the demand, the emotional intensity they've learned to fear. But when you no longer need anything from them, not reassurance, not validation, not even a response, everything shifts. Saying "I'm good" is a declaration of inner power. It tells the world, and more importantly yourself, that you're no longer living on the emotional roller coaster of someone else's inconsistency, that you're centered, grounded, and at peace, even in the absence of closure or answers. And the moment you embody that kind of energy, something inside the avoidant starts to stir, because now you're no longer part of the pattern they're used to. You're not reacting, you're not pulling, you're not waiting, you're rising, and what they feel, though they may never admit it, is the growing weight of your self-worth, the quiet confidence in your voice, the emotional clarity in your energy. You've stopped handing them the power to determine your value. You've taken it back, and that scares them in the best way. It forces them to ask, did I lose them? Have they changed? Why does their peace make me feel so uneasy? That inner unrest is the very thing that flips the switch inside them, because the person who once needed them to feel okay now feels whole without them, and that shift, that's what makes an avoidant pause. Not because you begged, but because you became. You became someone rooted, someone elevated, someone unattached yet open. Someone who can look love in the face and say, "I want it, but I don't need it to complete me. I'm already complete." That is power. That is peace. That is when the story changes, not just with them, but forever within you. At the core of every avoidant lies a quiet storm, fear of closeness, fear of dependence, fear of losing control. But what most people don't realize is that the key to connection with an avoidant doesn't lie in trying harder, loving louder, or pushing past their boundaries. It lies in subtle power, in calibrated energy, in reclaiming your focus and shifting the dynamic from reaction to intention. This journey is not about tricking them into love, it's about awakening something within you so strong, so grounded, so magnetic, that they can't help but feel it. You don't chase, you don't force, you align, and when your alignment speaks louder than your words, their defenses begin to crumble. Each of the 7 steps in this journey is a reflection of emotional mastery. From speaking the words, "I understand," to choosing unpredictability and radiating a pressure-free presence, you're not just flipping their emotional switch, You're flipping your own internal compass. You're learning to stop leading with fear and start leading with faith. Faith in yourself, faith in the power of space, faith that you don't have to become smaller to hold onto someone afraid of intimacy. In fact, the bigger you grow, the more visible you become to them. And not just visible, undeniable. What you're doing through these 7 days is more than behavior change. It's energetic transformation. You're taking your power back in small but seismic ways. You're showing the avoidant, through calm action and quiet confidence, that love doesn't have to come with pressure, pain, or performance. It can come from wholeness, it can come from freedom, and it can come from someone who no longer fears being left, because they've stopped leaving themselves. That's the real breakthrough. When you live from that place, you don't beg to be seen. You are seen, not because you demanded it, but because your energy commands it. So let this journey not just be about them. Let it be about you. Let it be about the version of yourself who no longer waits for someone else's emotional awakening to feel worthy. The version who no longer overgives just to be chosen. Let this be your 7-day return to power, to peace, to purpose. And whether the avoidant comes closer or not, you will rise. Because you didn't flip their switch just to win them back. You flipped it to remind yourself of the kind of love you were always meant to receive. Anchored, secure, and built on the unshakable truth that you, just as you are already enough. Thank you for sharing your time and energy with this message. If this resonated with you, know that it wasn't by accident. Your growth, your healing, and your power are unfolding right now. This journey isn't just about understanding the avoidant. It's about rediscovering yourself. If you found value in this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deeply transformational content. Your support helps us reach more hearts that need to hear these words. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and most importantly, choose yourself every single day. You're seen, you're heard, you're enough. Thank you, and goodbye for now.